The problem is that I remember everything. Everything. Most souls get the mercy of a rinse between lives, the river, the wheel, whatever your local religion calls the part where they hose you down and hand you back empty. Not me. I carry every life I've ever lived, complete and itemized, in a set of books that never close. My first life was modern, unremarkable, and mine. I had an apartment, a fiancé, and a savings account, and I lost all three in the same fiscal quarter. The account to a banking error that three separate departments called regrettable and none called reversible. The fiancé to a man with better liquidity, and the apartment to simple arithmetic. I died at night, on wet pavement, for the crime of walking somewhere dark while carrying a phone worth stealing. The knife was fast, the street was empty, and the last thing I learned in that world was that a man can end as a rounding error. Nobody was charged. Nobody looked. I remember thinking, at least it cannot get dumber than this. I was young then. I had only died once. In my second life I was born a slave, which at least saved everyone the paperwork of making me one. I was bought 4 times and sold 5. Do not ask how that arithmetic works. The market has its ways. The 4th buyer was a lord who treated me decently. He taught me letters, he let me keep a name, and for 6 years I believed I had found the one decent man that power forgot to ruin. In the 7th year he sold me to cover a gambling debt, and I learned that decency with a price tag is only patience. I could walk you through the other lives, but you have somewhere to be, and so, at long last, do I. There was a pattern, and I was slow, so it took me lifetimes to see it. I kept being good, loyal, useful, the man who holds the door, takes the knife, and dies so that somebody with better lighting can live. And the formula does not work. It has never once worked. So when I died the last time and felt the wheel reaching for me again, I did the one thing I had never tried in all my careful, decent existences. I refused. I told the gods in these exact words to go stick it. Make me a plant, I said, a rock, a hinge, anything that is finished. That is when the light stopped being scenery. She sat down next to me in the nowhere between lives, the way you sit next to a stranger at a bus stop, and she was beautiful in the way that makes a dead man check his posture. Silver hair, gold eyes, and the deeply unsettling air of a woman who has been watching you through the window for years and enjoying the show. Serena, goddess of light, patroness of a world I had never heard of, and, by her own immediate and unashamed admission, a devoted viewer of what she called long-format tragedy. She had seen my file. All of it. She asked me one question, and it was not, "Are you all right?" She said, "Are you done being the good guy? Because from where I sit, darling, you have a formula, and the formula does not work." I said nothing, which she took, correctly, as yes. So she named your terms, counting them on her fingers like a merchant who knows you are already buying. A world. A body. Power. Real power. Her own. The kind that cannot be repossessed, and in return, one thing only, entertain me. Be interesting. I have watched 900 years of nobles being nobles, and I am so bored I could weep. I had spent a dozen lives being sold by people who dressed it up as destiny. She was the first buyer honest enough to call it a deal. I said yes. We shook on it, if that is the word for what happens when a goddess touches your soul. It is not. I woke to the sound of a rope. Not a metaphor. An actual rope, going taut somewhere above me, with a man on the end of it. I was on my knees, on cold cobblestones, which, I would come to learn, is my signature position for starting lives, and the first 3 facts of my new existence arrived in strict order. 1. Everything hurt. Not sore hurt, audit hurt, the deep itemized ache of a body that has been spending far beyond its income, and the wave of it broke over me and folded me onto my hands. 2. The hands were not mine. Bigger. Scarred. Sword calluses I had never earned. Above me, against a grey morning sky, a well-dressed man was dying at the end of that rope, hanged from the wall of what was very obviously his own house, and every face in that courtyard was turning from him to me with an expression I have seen in every life I have ever lived, and it has never once meant anything good. Then the guards arrived, and the courtyard's opinion arrived with them, boots first. I did not resist. Resisting seemed like a great deal of effort on behalf of a man whose name I did not even know yet. The name was waiting for me in the cell. They chained me to a wall that had held better men. I say that with confidence, because the wall had reviews carved into it, and left me alone with my new body and no instructions. So I did what I always do. Inventory. 2 arms, functional, furious about it, a stitched wound in my side that should have been a grave. Whoever this man was, someone had already killed him once, and he had apparently declined. Shoulders that knew work I had never done. A back that felt strangely blank, like a page waiting for something. I was still counting when the memories came. There was no drum roll and no light. The cell was empty, and then it was full. An entire life delivered in one motion, the way a ledger lands on a desk. "Sit down," said the life. "You will want to be sitting." I was chained to a wall. Close enough. His name was Soren Corvell, a sworn sword of the great house Ravenhold, oath-bound, house-fed. The kind of man I have been in at least 3 lives, so the shape of him fit me like an old uniform. And he loved, carefully and then not carefully at all, Aveline Raven. I want to be precise about her because his memory is precise about her, and I owe him that. The last daughter of House Raven, the small old house the great one had grown out of, the original name, worn down to 1 heir with just enough land to matter and no family left to guard it. She once told him that Ravenholz was the fortress her family built and then got locked out of, and she said it the way you tell a joke at a funeral, quietly, at the wrong moment, so that it becomes survivable. A sworn sword does not marry an heiress. They let him. Nobody objected, and he was too happy to ask why nobody objected. And I have read that memory a dozen times now, and the answer is always sitting right there in the silence. Dead women's marriages do not need objecting to. They gave them 1 year. I want the record to show that I have never been loved in any life I can remember. Not for sympathy, but for accuracy, because of what came next. I now remember being loved, in perfect detail. Second-hand. It is the most valuable thing anyone has ever given me, and the cruelest, and I carry it the way he carried his sword, both hands. The rest of the ledger reads quickly, because Alaric Raven was not a complicated man. Here of Ravenhold, expensive habits, a small old house standing between him and a rounder set of books. The killers came at night, and they were thorough in the way money is thorough. Aveline, her household, every servant who had smiled at that wedding, every soul that loved the sworn sword enough to be inconvenient, and the knight himself opened up and left on the flagstones with a professional's confidence, which was their one mistake, because nobody checks whether a dead man is finished. He got up. What followed took him 4 days, and I will not walk you through it, because the memories are thorough and some doors I close on purpose. I will say this much. He worked in order. He was fair by his own accounting. Nobody died who had not earned the line item. And he saved Alaric for last, and hanged him from his own wall, so that the house would have to look at its bookkeeping every morning until somebody cut it down. He was dying the entire time. The wound should have taken him in a day. He made it hold for, on nothing but the list. And the moment the rope went tight, the exact moment the last account closed, the previous owner settled his estate and moved out, and the new tenant woke up on his knees in the yard, holding the receipts. I have inherited many things across many lives, debts mostly, never before a finished revenge. I went through his whole ledger looking for errors. There are none, wherever you are now. Previous owner, excellent work. The remainder is mine." On the third day the jailer left extra bread under my bowl. He was an old man with a face like a walnut, and he had said nothing to me through 6 meals, which I respected. I turned the bread over, looking for the price. There is always a price. I have 3 lifetimes of purchase records to prove it. When he came back I asked him plainly what it cost, and he looked at me for a long moment through the bars and said, "Nothing." The Lady Aveline spoke to my granddaughter once, at the gate, when nobody was watching to be impressed. Kind she was. Then he shuffled off down the corridor, and I sat there holding warm bread in a murderer's hands, running the number every way I know how. Bread, unpaid for, from a man with nothing to gain, given to a prisoner the whole house had agreed to hate. There is no column for it. I ate it slowly, decided not to think about it, and then thought about nothing else until morning. Somewhere in this house the official story was already being written. The bread was the first vote against it. There was no trial, because great houses do not hold trials for their own, they hold audits. They walked me into the long hall in chains, and the whole assembled household got to look at the man wearing their dead knight, and at the head of it all, in mourning clothes tailored a shade too well and a week too fast, stood the new lord of Ravenhold. Lucian Raven, brother of the hanged, he asked as a formality, whether I denied it. And this body had paid for itself in blood. I did not spill, and the previous owner's books were clean, so I gave the only answer worthy of him. I stood as straight as the chains allowed and said, "No, I killed them, and they deserved it." The hall made a sound like ice cracking. Lucian smiled, and then, I swear to you, he laughed, warmly, delightedly, like a man opening exactly the gift he had hinted for. "You fought so hard for a noble's rank," he said, "killed every noble you wished to be. And who is this house to stand in the way of ambition? So here is my gift, kinslayer. Land, and the title of Lord, in the north." The hall laughed with him, on cue, the way halls do. And then he stepped close, and dropped his voice to the register you use for family, and said the part that mattered, so that you, and everyone who ever looks at you, will remember what your lordship was paid with. "We are going to burn the receipt into your back." Ravenblood buys Corvel. It always has. They did it in the armory yard, and they gave the iron to his sword brothers, which was the one detail I had not priced in. Men out of the memories. Faces the previous owner had trusted at his wedding, at his watch, at his back. They believed the story. I could see it in how they would not look at me. Believed their brother had broken his oath, and butchered the family he was sworn to. And so they held the raven iron with the grim faces of men doing a sad, necessary thing. The one who had loved him best said quietly, "Now you will never forget your broken oath. And I want you to appreciate, as the iron came down, the sheer scale of what they got wrong. They chose the single punishment in this world I am immune to. Memory has never once been my problem. I would love to tell you I took it in silence. I am told the stables heard me. But I never stopped counting. Item 1, a raven. Wings spread from shoulder to shoulder, large enough to read at 100 paces. Item 2, delivered by brothers, at a liar's word, to the only man in the yard whose oath was actually kept. Item 3, interest, to be determined. A world that punishes a just act 3 times in 1 week should really check who it is teaching and what. They processed me out the north gate at dawn with a pack, a knife, and I genuinely treasure this actual letters patent, sealed and countersigned, because the joke was only funny to Lucian if the title was real. Lord Soren Corvel. Of the north. The clerks said the north the way you say a diagnosis. Beyond the wall's shadow the world went gray, and then violet, and the famous haze came down to look at me, and stepped aside, parted politely, like smoke declining an argument, because something in my blood was holding a door I had not knocked on. Her power. Keeping its first promise. So, the closing balance. Assets. 1 borrowed body. Paid in full by the previous owner. One lordship granted in mockery legally perfect. One raven temporary. One deal with a goddess who thinks my suffering has excellent pacing. Liabilities, Lucian Raven. No brother of mine. Warming a seat that Aveline's death paid for. A house wearing a name it stole. And an official story with exactly one vote against it. Currently baking bread. They tell me the North is a fate worse than death. They keep saying that to a man who has died more times than they have hanged. Somewhere above the gray, someone refilled her cup and settled in. Fine. She paid for a show. Let us go give her something worth watching. Let me sketch you the world I have just been sentenced to, as assembled from a dead man's memories. 3 days of cell gossip, and a goddess who kept skipping the boring parts. Once, this world was whole. Then the demon lord came out of the far dark with his hosts, and the kingdoms fell the way kingdoms actually fall, not in one battle, but in a long series of reasonable decisions that were each slightly too late. That is the official history, and I will be quoting the official history all episode, because it is the only one on offer. Where the armies broke, the miasma came down behind them, a violet haze soft as evening, patient as rust. It does not burn, and it does not choke. It keeps. Stand in it long enough, unprotected, and you change, joint by joint, until the thing wearing your coat forgets your name before your family does. Every fallen village became a garrison of its own dead. The war has been over for generations. Nobody told the war. What survived of mankind fits behind one wall in the enclave, the last city, stone and prayer, with the sea at its back like a promise nobody believes. And the prayer comes in bulk. The enclave keeps a crowded sky, great temples to the god of war, the mother of harvests, the judge of the dead, a full pantheon of the large and the loud, each with banners, choirs, and a waiting list. Because the gods are not decoration here. They are the economy. A great god can lend a mortal a sliver of himself, a blessing, a system, power fitted into flesh, and a mortal so blessed becomes a lord, magic in the veins, the miasma held at arm's length, and a license to take the dead world back one fief at a time. But understand what the blessing is, and what it is not. The gods hand a lord a system, land right, summoning, the long ladder, never spellcraft. Actual magic, the real singing kind, walks this world only inside what the lords summon, and a mage among your summons is the rarest pull the gates ever give. Most lords live and die without one, which makes magic the strangest currency in this economy. You cannot learn it. You cannot buy it. You can only be lucky enough to call it. The lords feed the city from their colonies. The city feeds the temples. The temples crown more lords, and the wheel turns on the god's own substance. As for my sponsor, you have met her, Serena. In that crowded sky she ranks somewhere between a household saint and a rounding error. The great gods underwrite hundreds of lords apiece. She could afford exactly one. I try not to think about what that arithmetic means. She thinks about it constantly and giggles. And so that you can follow the sport, every lord and every soul under one carries a rank. Black iron at the bottom, then bronze, silver, gold, and at the top mithril 9 steps to each tier, a lifetime to most of them. In the capital they whisper about mithril lords who stopped aging somewhere up the ladder, which the church neither confirms nor denies. Which is how you confirm things in a church. As for me, I walked out of the gate with a pack, a knife, and letters patent naming me Lord of the deepest, deadest fief on the books, sealed, countersigned, garnished with a tribute schedule, and finished with my favorite clause of all, a traveling allowance. 40 silver. 1 silver per day, prepaid. Somewhere in that gray house an actuary looked at my sentence, consulted his tables, and gave me 40 days to live, then rounded in my favor, out of professional courtesy. I am keeping the receipt. Some day I intend to frame it, hang it in a manner of my own, and charge Ravenhold admission to see it. 600 kilometers of road between me and my inheritance. A tour of everything I would have to become, and a masterclass in everything I intend to do differently. The first week's north, the world still pretends everything is fine. I pass through Fairholt, one of the old domains, 3 generations settled, walls gone soft with ivy, a market square with actual butter in it. On the square stood the ranking board, its names written in small standing light, and I stood before it like every traveler does, reading the neighborhood, the local lord at silver too, his knights in bronze, the year's best souls listed like harvest numbers. Tribute convoys rolled south through the gate all morning, stamped and counted. A priest of the Harvest Mother walked the wagon line, chalking her sigil on every tarp, and the chalk, as far as I could tell, did nothing whatsoever. Everyone felt better anyway. That, too, is infrastructure. And at the wayside shrine the carters touched the Harvest Mother's gilded statue for luck. Around the back, half hidden by the woodpile, stood a second shrine, the size of a birdhouse, silver paint peeling, 1 candle stub, the little lady of light that nobody famous prays to any more. I lit the stub, and paid my respects. Exactly. Somewhere far above, I am fairly certain, someone choked on something expensive. I paid 1 silver for my room and board, tipped in copper precisely, and left before my name caught up with me. It was already trying. In Fairholt they said the kinslayer of Ravenhold had cut down 6 men. By the next town it would be 10. Before I left, I saw Fairholt's treasure, because it was Temple Day, and the whole town went to watch. Fairholt keeps a mage. Keeps. That is the working word. 1 mage, summoned by the old lord's father in a pole. The town still talks about the way other towns talk about floods, and half the square gathered like it was theater, because it was. He came out at noon, an old summoned man in undyed robes, calm as furniture, with the lord's steward beside him carrying, I am delighted to report, a ledger. And the line came forward. A carter with a crushed arm, set and mended in a slow wash of pale light, to applause. A fevered child quieted. A cracked millstone, of all things, seemed back together, because magic this rare does not get to be picky about glamour. Every working was announced. Every working was written down. Even miracles get invoiced here, and I have never felt more at home. "Understand what you are looking at," said a granny beside me, proud as if she had summoned him herself. "The lord 2 towns over has no mage at all. Most of them never will. I watched the only spellcaster for 100 miles mend a wheelbarrow to polite applause, and revised my understanding of wealth on this frontier. It is not gold. It was never gold. It is 1 calm old healer with a ledger at his elbow, and the whole town knows his feast day. 2 days past Fairholt there is a road inn, and in that inn I learned something about myself that 12 lives had failed to teach me. I was eating. A caravan crew was drinking, 5 of them, loud in the way of men who travel armed among the unarmed. And the serving girl, 17 maybe, quick with the jug, tired around the eyes, got caught by the wrist by the loudest one, a big man with rings on his fingers who found himself hilarious, and pulled half across the table while his friends pounded the boards and howled. She said let go politely. Twice. Politeness was the wrong currency. His grip whitened, and I watched her face do the arithmetic that girls in taverns are forced to learn. How much this would cost her to endure, versus how much to resist. And I was standing. I want to be honest about the order of events. I did not decide to stand. I was simply up, my stew going cold behind me, and my mouth said, "Keep it down. Quiet, flat. The voice you use on a barking dog." The room went still, and somewhere between my chair and that sentence, the oldest bookkeeper in my soul filed his report. "There it is," he said, "the formula. The reflex that has killed you a dozen times, in a dozen taverns. Just like this one, wearing a dozen faces, just this stupid." The big man let her go. Slowly, smiling, and all 5 of them came off the bench and made a ring around me, cracking their knuckles the way men do when they have counted 5 against one, and like the arithmetic. And here is where the new management took over. The good guy waits. That is the whole flaw in the design. He lets the other man choose the moment, because waiting is what proves he is good. I have died of that proof more than once, and the marble was cold every single time, so I did not wait. The ring-fingered one still had his hand resting on his knife when I took his wrist and turned it the wrong way round until something gave, and then I put him through the table. Through it. Planks, stew, and all, and the crash took the second man's nerve half a beat before my elbow took his jaw. He sat down among the bowls with his eyes pointing at different corners of the room. The third swung a bottle at my head. I stepped inside the ark, caught his collar, and introduced his face to the roof post. Once for the girl, once for symmetry. The fourth actually made it 2 steps toward the door, which I found insulting. I brought him back by the belt, and folded him over a bench with a short, honest punch that emptied him of opinions. That left the comedian, the wrist collector, wheezing in the ruins of the table and scrabbling for his knife with his good hand. I knelt, closed his fingers around the grip, and then closed my hand around his fingers, and squeezed slowly until the knife and several small important things gave way together, and set him down again, gently, the way you present a bill, 4 breaths, start to finish. The room was silent except for a boot heel drumming the floor and the fire minding its own business. I set my chair upright. I sat. I finished the stew, which was still warm, and counted out coins onto the bar for 1 broken table, 2 stools, and a jug, to the copper, plus a tip for the mess. The girl refilled my bowl without being asked. Her hands were shaking. The refill was free, and I left the coin under the rim anyway, because my books do not do gifts. Then I sat in the quiet, warm, unstabbed, mildly disappointed in the local standard of knife work, and wrote the day's finding into the new ledger. The goodness was never the flaw. The waiting was. Keep the reflex. Fire the patience. It feels a very great deal better than dying. The road north of the inn belongs to nobody, and nobody's roads have teeth. The wolves found me at dusk on the 9th day, 5 of them, lean winter shapes sliding out of the tree line, spreading wide without a sound, the way professionals spread. I got a boulder at my back and the sword out, and the pack went to work on me like they had done this before, because they had, 2 in front, feinting in turn, patient, while a third drifted at the edge of my eye, waiting for my attention to pick a side. The leader hung back and watched, and I swear it was reading me. The first rush came from the blind side, low and silent, and this body turned before I decided anything, 20 years of drill answering for me, and the blade caught the wolf mid-leap and finished it before it landed. The rest never flinched. They tightened. The leader chose its moment the way a good commander does, off the back of a feint, 2 of them coming together from both sides, and the drilled hands did the wide, ugly sweep that keeps 2 mouths off 1 man, buying space, not blood, and my own 3 lifetimes of soldiering did the rest. I stepped into the leader instead of away, which nothing hunted ever expects, and took it through the chest on the counter. It died with its teeth a hand's width from my throat, and it died surprised. That broke them. The remaining 3 pulled off into the dark, unhurried professional to the end. No grudge, just a venture that had stopped paying. I stood against my boulder with a torn coat, a burning line across 1 forearm, and 2 dead wolves in the snow light, breathing like a bellows and feeling, for the first time in weeks, completely without irony, alive. Then I rolled my sleeves up because the evening was young and the dead do not keep. Somewhere in my lives I have been the man who does the skinning, several times. Poverty is a comprehensive education, and the hands remember that trade too, even in a knight's body. I dressed both wolves by firelight, working slow and clean, scraped the hides and smoked the meat in strips over a birch fire through half the night. And somewhere between the first hide and the second, the accountant in me sat up and looked at the pile. 2 winter pelts, thick and unhold, 8, maybe 9 silver each, to a tanner who knows his trade. More smoked wolf than one man can eat before it turns, and one village left on the map before the deep north, a small place called Dunmere, 2 days out. I looked at it all laid out on the snow, and the decision made itself in the only language I trust. A man who walks into a poor village with meat and pelts is not a stranger. He is commerce. Strangers get counted twice and watched. Commerce gets a fair table and a fire. So I packed my supper's murderers with the respect due to honest merchandise. They, at least, had been straightforward about wanting to eat me, and turned my boots toward Dunmere, a traveling salesman with a sword, on a route nobody wanted, with inventory nobody else could get. There are worse business models. I have lived several. A balance, then, from the last camp before Dunmere, because the habit is older than several of my deaths. Cash on hand, 31 silver and 40 copper, the unspent remains of Ravenhold's 40-day estimate of my life. Inventory 2 winter pelts, 1 shoulder of smoked wolf, valued optimistically at a week of village prices. Expenses to date, room, board, 1 broken table with stools and a tip. Injuries, 1 forearm healing, 1 coat beyond audit. Learned so far, magic is 1 old man per 100 miles. My legend gains 4 bodies per town, and the reflex that kept killing me works fine. It just needed new management. Ahead, Dunmere, the last warm fire on the map. Past that, a bridge lord called Bane, that the carters speak of like weather, and then the stretch the cartographers label with the word they use when they are paid to be polite about nothing at all. The deep north. I banked the fire and watched the violet horizon breathe, 1 hand higher than yesterday. Intermission, my lady. Stretch your legs. The road was the easy part. Dunmere is the kind of village that counts strangers twice, and I walked in as the best kind of stranger, one with goods. Word moves fast in a place with 1 street. By the time I reached the square I had an escort of children, and the tanner was already wiping his hands. He turned my pelts over, gave them the frown of his profession, and opened at 9 silver for the pair, which was an insult wearing a hat. The fair price for winter wolf brushed and unholed is 8, and some per hide. One of my lives kept books for a market house, and that man does not sleep, he audits. So I said 17 for the pair. He offered 12. I said 17, in the tone of a man reading a water meter. He studied my face for a while, found nothing in it to bargain with, and counted out 17 silver, and by then half the street had drifted over to watch, because entertainment is scarce this far north. Then the innkeeper, flustered by the audience and keen to look generous, offered me above the going rate for the smoked meat, and met the same wall from the other side. Fairness is non-negotiable, gentlemen, in both directions. He paid 9 silver, the correct price to the copper, visibly confused about whether he had won. And then the innkeeper did something no ledger had prepared me for. He looked at the meat and at me and said, "You will eat with us tonight. Your wolves, our pot, the whole street is coming. A man does not sell a village its winter feast and then chew jerky alone in the dark like an owl." I opened my mouth to decline, because declining is a reflex from lives where invitations had prices hidden in the upholstery. Then I closed it. The pot was already being carried to the fire by 2 boys who clearly considered this the event of their month. So that evening Dunmere put its 1 long table in the middle of its 1 street, and the village ate my supper's murderers, and I sat among them, passed the bread, learned 11 names I still remember, was asked mine, and gave the only one I own now. "Soren," I said. "No house, just Soren." Nobody blinked. "This far north," said the blacksmith's wife, "houses are what you burn when the wood runs out." I laughed before I could decide whether to, and somewhere in my chest the bookkeeper opened a new column and could not find a heading for it. "Goodwill," he wrote finally. "Market value, Unknown. Keep the receipt. It was at that table, deep in the evening, that the oldest man in Dunmere, a border veteran with one arm and no patience for soup, gave me the fall of the world the way his grandfather had given it to him. The horns and the dark, the rivers running the wrong color, the day the sky went violet and stayed. He told it well, the way men tell things they have polished for 50 years, and the table went quiet under it, even the children. And then, into his cup, he said the thing that has been itching in me since. My grandfather swore that at the last bridge the demons carried banners, proper banners sewn with devices like men. He said, no beast ever born marches in ranks under a sewn banner. Then he laughed at himself, and called it an old man's story, and the table laughed with him, and I laughed too and filed it on the page where I keep things that do not add up. That page is getting full, and I have not even arrived yet. North of Dunmere the world starts saying its goodbyes. The farms first, then the fences, then the road itself, thinning to a rumour with wheel ruts. 2 days out at the old ford, the willows grew opinions. 8 men came out of them in a practised fan, unhurried, spreading to cut the bank both ways, and I did what I always do first. I offered them arithmetic. Gentlemen, I said, here is the full inventory, 50 odd silver, a knife, a sword, and yesterday's jerky. Here is the price list. The first 2 of you reach me for free. The rest pay in bone. Casualty estimates available on request. I keep the speech short. In 13 lives nobody has ever taken the deal. They laughed. They always laugh. And at the back of the fan, a tall one with a boatman's hook on his belt watched me with the bored eyes of a man who had run this exact play 40 times, and tipped his chin and sent them in. The first 2 reached me for free, exactly as advertised. The body swordwork met one at the waterline, and the second a half step behind him, and both went down still owing me. After that it stopped being advertising. They came in pairs, staggered, herding me along the bank toward the rail of the old ford bridge, and the work got close and ugly. A knife along my ribs that the coat mostly paid for, an elbow I will remember for a week, the 3rd man down, the 4th folding over my pommel with all his air leaving at once. Then my boot found the wet plank. 2 blades came in at once from both sides. My feet went out from under me, and for 1 full heartbeat the book said, overdrawn. What happened in that heartbeat I want on the record, even though I ignored it at the time. A warmth went through me like a struck match, gold at the edge of my vision, and for maybe 3 heartbeats my body was lighter, faster, as if someone somewhere had briefly turned down the price of moving. The blades missed. My sword did not. And in my old line of work I wrote that exact moment 40 times. The golden glow, the sudden strength, cue the tutorial, roll the music. I am, by any fair measure, the one man in 13 worlds best qualified to recognize that scene from the inside. And I had no time to recognize anything because the tall one was finally walking in with his hook, annoyed at the standard of help these days. It did not save him. When it was over, 5 down, 3 gone into the willows, me bleeding but ambulatory, I went through the dead men's coats, as one does, and the arithmetic came up strange. 40 silver between 5 professionals, thin wages for such confident men. And then, folded soft with age in the tall one's breast pocket, I found the other thing his sort carries. Paper. His own bounty notice kept the way an actor keeps a review the ferrymen wanted for the toll of the northern fords, for robbery and murder in counts beyond listing. 1 gold for him, and 10 silver for each companion, stamped by the church itself, payable at any lord's seat. He had been carrying his own price on his heart for years. I respected that more than anything he ever did with the hook, which presented a business decision alone at a ford, with evening coming down. A bounty is paid on proof, and proof on this frontier is traditional and specific. I stood over the 5 of them for a while, doing the moral arithmetic, and I want to walk you through the ledger honestly. These were not desperate men. Desperate men take the deal. These were career men. At a crossing they had bled for years, wanted by every lord's seat on the map, and the only reason their column was still open is that nobody had survived long enough to close it. I have been the man robbed at a crossing, twice, in 2 different lives, and once it cost me everything I was carrying and most of what I was. So, I will spare you the harvest. It was 10 minutes of unpleasant knife work, done plainly, and I have done uglier for smaller reasons in worse lives. I wrapped the proof in the ferryman's own coat, bound the bundle with his own belt, and walked the last 2 days to Coldbridge, carrying the North's most wanted men from one fist, like a lantern nobody once lit. The changed at the tree line watched me pass, and kept their distance all the way. I choose to take that professionally. Coldbridge announces itself as a bridge that grew a town, the way a keel grows a ship, one great stone span over black water, gatehouse at the near end, walls hugging both banks. I came up to the toll table at midday, set the bundle down beside the clerk's scales, and asked politely where a traveler files a claim. The clerk unwrapped one corner, went the exact color of the river, and shouted a name up the wall. Not mine, his, the ferryman. And Coldbridge stopped, boots on stairs, a bell rung twice. People coming out of doorways along the whole bridge to stare at a wrapped bundle on the toll table. Because everyone north of Dunmere had paid that man's toll in coin or in kin, and nobody looked away, and somebody far back started very quietly to cheer and was shushed like it was church. Within 10 minutes I was being walked across the span, respectfully at spear point, a combination this frontier has mastered, to the Lord's Hall, because men this wanted are not paid out by a toll clerk. Behind me the cheer got loose again, and this time nobody shushed it. The Lord of Coldbridge met me in his hall with the bundle already on his table and his own scales beside it. Edric Vane, 50-some, built like his gatehouse, bronze 4, after 20 years of honest clawing. He told me that himself, first thing, the way you show a stranger your scars so the conversation can skip the line. He verified the proof himself, without flinching, like a man checking a delivery of iron. Then he counted the bounty onto the table with his own hands. 1 gold piece, church-stamped, heavy as a promise, and 40 silver for the companions, 10 the head. 8 of them, the road says, he said while I stacked it. Alone. And you brought the proof in from 2 days out like a man delivering turnips. Who in all the drowned north are you? And that is when his steward leaned in and murmured, and I watched the arithmetic land on his face, the road's favorite story, the hanged heir, the burned back. He was quiet for a long moment. I do not host kinslayers, he said at last. And then, before I could reach for my coin, but I knew Evelyn's mother, her line bought this bridge its first winter, back when Coldbridge was 2 huts and a debt. So you will stay the night, and you will tell me the story, the real one, not the one the road is selling. You owe her family that much, whoever you are. I have been welcomed with feasts, with chains, and once, memorably, with an auction paddle. I had never been welcomed with a bounty and a debt to a dead woman's mother. I stayed. So I told him at his own table the whole ledger of it, and he listened the way old soldiers listen, still hands, still face, without once touching his cup. His steward poured twice and gave up. When I finished, he was quiet for a long while, long enough that I could hear the bridge under the hall, the river working the pilings. Then he said, carefully, in the voice of a man laying stones, Alaric Raven once hanged 3 of my carters over a toll he invented that same morning. I am told grief is customary when an heir dies. I expect I will get around to it. And that was all. But I watched this gruff, independent man choose every word with tongs, on his own land, behind his own walls, 200 miles from the nearest Raven banner, and I finally understood the true size of the thing I have made an enemy of. Ravenhold is not loved out here. It is feared, which pays better and costs more. Half the North would send flowers to that grave if it were safe to sign the card. I filed it under assets, distant and unrealized, but real. He gave me a bed, and I want to log what a bed is, because I intend to deal in them. A mattress, a fire and a small iron stove, a basin of water so hot it required a decision. I lay in the dark doing the arithmetic of comfort. The first warm, safe, horizontal night in 3 weeks, and I made a policy note for the fief I have never seen. When my land has walls, it will have baths. Hot ones. That is not a luxury. That is retention infrastructure. I have been a worker in too many lives to believe otherwise. Somewhere below, the river ran its cold accounts under the bridge. I slept 9 hours for the first time in either of this body's lives. And if the previous owner dreamed, he was polite enough not to share. At dawn I saw Coldbridge's entire stock of magic, and it was worth getting up for. A quiet grey woman walked the wall in the half-light, unhurried as weather, with her palm flat against the stone, and wherever her hand passed, the mortar warmed and settled, hairline cracks closing as if the wall breathed easier. Thane stood beside me with his morning bread, and watched her the way other men watch sunrises. 20 years of tribute, he said, bought exactly 1 mage. 1 pull. The temple wanted me to take a battlecaster. Impressive fellow, apparently. Throws fire. And I thought, I live on a bridge, in the cold, at the end of the world. So I chose one that builds. He said it without apology and without pride. Just a man reading his own books aloud, and I revise my opinion of Bronze 4. The latter measures power. It does not measure judgment. At the gate he handed me the sentence I have been keeping warm since. The North eats lords, kinslayer. But if you are alive in a season, send word south. Coldbridge buys timber, and nobody here will ask where you got your title. Past Coldbridge, the road stops being a road, and one day short of the fog I walked through the answer to a question I had not asked out loud. What happens to the ones who do not come back? The maps called it Harrow's Fief. It had been a domain once. You could read the whole biography from the ruins, and I did, room by room, because this body once belonged to a soldier, one of my old lives belonged to an accountant, and between them they refused to walk past an unaudited wreck. A wall begun in stone and finished in panic-driven timber. A barracks, bigger than the granary, he bought swords before bread. Fields cleared too wide to hold, a well dug in the wrong place, and, on the highest floor of the broken tower, a small room with a barred door and 30 tally marks scratched beside the window that faces south, toward home. I stood in that room a long time. Then I went down and closed the door, out of respect, and wrote the whole estate into my ledger under lessons, paid for by someone else, bread before swords, walls you can hold, and never build the room that faces home. The fog wall stands one morning past Harrow's grave, and no map prepares you for it. A violet cliff of weather from horizon to horizon, breathing slow, going up further than the birds go. My fief is on the other side of it somewhere, along with everything else the world lost. I made camp at the last shrine. Someone had kept it swept, which out here counts as a miracle. And in the dusk I saw my first of the changed up close, standing just inside the haze like drowned men stand in deep water. Gray skin webbed with violet, joints that bend a half-beat late, and the remnants, the terrible remnants, an apron, a shepherd's crook, a thin ring grown into a gray finger. They did not come out. They watched me the whole night, patient as an audience before the curtain, and I sat by my fire and watched them back and understood, properly, for the first time, what I have been given. Not a punishment, an inheritance with the previous tenants still inside. Fine. I have experience with that. Balance, then, at the edge of the map. 3 weeks on the road, end to end. Assets, 1 body, healing well and full of another man's excellent training. 2 gold and 30-odd silver. Allowance funded, wolf-funded, bandit-donated, and bounty-certified, which I believe makes mine the most honestly diversified ledger on this frontier. Letters patent to a land nobody has held in living memory, and a standing offer from a bridge lord who buys timber and asks no questions. Intelligence gathered, Edric Vane showed me how a domain lives, and Harrow's grave taught me every way one dies. One old man's banner story, filed where it itches. And one golden flicker at a river ford that I am still officially calling adrenaline. Liabilities unchanged, and living comfortably in a manor 600 kilometers behind me. The fob does not open for the worthy. It opens for the paid up, and whatever is in my blood settled that bill 3 weeks ago, at a ceremony I was rude enough to survive. So, in we go. Somewhere above the violet, I assumed the cup was full, the seat was good, and the ratings among the divine demographic were holding steady at 1, delighted. Episode 4, my lady. Try to act surprised. And that is how I got here. I told you the whole road, the inn, the wolves, the ferryman, the bridge, and I want it noted that I told it to the politest audience I have ever had. They walked with me the entire way through the fog, the changed of the deep north, a loose procession of gray shapes drifting between the trees on both sides, never closer, never farther, patient as creditors. Whatever her spark is doing in my blood, it holds the haze open around me in a corridor of clean air, and it holds them at the edge of it. And so we traveled together, me and the dead, for 4 days through a world the maps gave up on. And here is what nobody in the Enclave tells you about the deep north. It is not a wasteland. Under the violet, the old world is still standing. Fences, nills, a stone bridge over a stream swept clean by 200 years of wind and nothing else. The miasma did not destroy any of it. It kept it. I walked through a museum with the lights off, escorted by the original owners, and tried very hard to think about inventory instead of the word haunted. On the 5th morning the fog thinned ahead, the way a crowd thins at the edge of something important, and I came over a rise and saw my inheritance. A city. Not a village, not a colony, a city of the old world, laid out along a slow river in the bowl of a wide valley. Walls soft with 2 centuries of moss, a bridge with 5 arches, streets in a confident grid around a market square, and above it all a small keep with its roof still on. Letters patent do not come with pictures. Lucian, in his generosity, had never mentioned what my punishment actually contained, and I stood on that rise doing the only arithmetic that mattered. Nobody had built here since the fall. This was original stock. Somewhere under my coat, against my chest, the deed had begun, very faintly, to warm, like a key recognizing its own door from across the room. I walked down into the valley with the papers of a dead house glowing over my heart, and the gray shapes in the fog behind me stopped at the ridgeline, all together, like mourners at the edge of a grave. They respect too much to enter. The city itself did not respect me nearly as much. They stood in the streets, in doorways, at windows, at the well, the kept citizens of my kept city, gray and violet-veined, wearing what they fell in, aprons, gilt sashes, a postman's bag gone stiff as bark. None of them moved toward me. All of them moved with me. Heads turning in doorways as I passed, slow as sunflowers, that half-beat late hinge of the joints that I will never in any life get used to. I kept my hand off my sword because 13 lives have taught me exactly one etiquette rule that matters. Do not draw first in someone else's house. I walked their streets like a guest, nodded to a gray woman with a market basket grown into her arm, apologized to something in a smith's apron whose forge I will need, and reached the market square with my escort watching from every doorway of every street that fed it. The deed against my chest was no longer warm. It was hot, and pulling like a compass needle standing on end. The center of the square held an old sunken fountain. The pull wanted exactly that spot. Well, I said, to the entire silent city if the paperwork insists. I set the deed on the fountain stone, and the ground took it. Not a metaphor. The parchment sank into solid stone like a coin into deep water, seal last, and the gold went outward from that point in seams, down the gutters, up the walls, along every roof line, faster than I could turn to follow, until the entire city was drawn in, running light against the violet sky. It was, and I say this as a man who wrote finales for a living, the single most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And then the city left. There is no better verb. Building by building, wall by wall, the whole of it came apart into motes of gold that rose like a harvest of stars and sank into the earth. Streets, bridge, keep, all of it gently, unhurried 200 years of kept stone, dissolving in the time it takes to pour a drink. The light went out, and I stood alone in a bare green valley under a bruised sky, next to a small stone shrine that had not been there a breath ago, and a wooden shack with a plank sign over the door, freshly carved in a language I somehow read, the Lord's Manor. I had inherited a city for roughly 11 minutes. Even by the standards of my previous lives, that is a record. She was leaning against the shrine, of course, her own shrine, admiring her own statue in it, which tells you everything. And she looked exactly as pleased as a producer on opening night. "Hello, my lord," said Serena, goddess of light, patroness of one. "Welcome home." I opened my mouth to ask about the city, and the system arrived instead. The first chime went through me like a struck bell. Host accepted. Wrote the gold across my vision, in clean small runes, and after that they came the way spring rain comes, one after another, each with its own little weight. A skill, settling into my bones like a signature, summoner of the goddess. All summons begin at gold tier, rank 1. I read that line 3 times, professionally stunned, because I have written gacha systems for a living and I know exactly what starting tiers are worth. A blueprint, unfolding behind my eyes like an architect's dream, the hero's sanctum, iron rank 1. Then something for me. "True ledger," said the rune, and the world grew price tags, the timber on the hills, the stone in the river bank, the axe leaning inside the shack door, every one of them quietly announcing its worth to the only man alive who would find that romantic. A map, mostly darkness, with one tile of it lit, the valley, my valley, an island of known in an ocean of fog, a pocket of nowhere that swallowed my pack whole and gave it back when I reached inventory linked to the domain. And at the last, in letters that managed to sound like her, directive, expand the domain, reward, to be determined by patron amusement. Then she pushed off the shrine, walked over, took my collar in both hands, and gave me her real gift. I will keep the details between professionals. It was the kind of kiss that gets written into liturgy, and light came with it, out of her and into me, down the spine, along the arms, a warmth, like standing too close to a benevolent forge, and somewhere in the middle of it the chime sounded again, politely, like a butler announcing dinner during a duel. Light forged blade master, rank S, rank 1. My right hand knew things when she let me go. Stances, angles, the particular patience of a blade held low. I reached, the way the skill was already teaching me to reach, and light poured into my grip and stood there for one heartbeat as a sword, weightless, absolutely present, humming one low note, before I let it fall apart into sparks, because my knees were not, at that moment, entirely reliable. She watched me wobble with enormous satisfaction. "Consider us even for the tavern," she said. I have no idea what she meant by even. I have some idea. Then school began, and school ran the whole night. She sat on the shrine steps with a cup from nowhere and taught me my own system the way you teach a colleague, not a child, costs first, because she knows her audience. Everything prices in the same 3 currencies, she said, coin, material, and you. The system shows you every number. Whether you can pay is your problem, that is the whole game. And then the terms of us, laid out plainly, the way I like terms. Of all the gods you should know, you are my only lord. The war god keeps 400, the harvest mother keeps 600 and loses count. I have you. So there are no priests between us, no committee, no quota. The politics of this world bore me, and I decline to participate. But this domain is wired between the two of us, my lord. You build it, you summon for it, you grow it, and every time you push your border outward, I am permitted to give you something, and what I give depends entirely on how well you have entertained me. She sipped. The tavern, by the way. I stood up and cheered. Nobody saw it, but it happened. Keep that standard, and we will get along famously. Now for the complaint I filed with the manufacturer, somewhere around the 3rd hour of that lesson. The previous owner of this body was 20-some, healthy and calibrated, I am discovering, with the willpower of a wet newspaper in the specific vicinity of beautiful women, and the beautiful woman in question was not helping. Understand what I was up against. She sat on the shrine steps in that white and gold gown somebody had poured her into, one bare shoulder catching the firelight, and whenever she leaned forward to sketch a price in the air, the neckline leaned with her, and whatever number I was holding evaporated like rain on a forge. She would shift her weight, and the slit of the gown would slide open along one long golden leg. Slow and entirely unhurried, and my eyes would go. Not drift. Go dragged like iron filings to a lodestone before anyone had consulted the tired old accountant living upstairs. The mind was reciting timber costs. The body had left the lecture and was making a detailed private study of the way silver hair slides from a bare shoulder when a goddess laughs, of the line of her waist when she reached for her cup, of the small deliberate arch of her back that I am certain was itemized under teaching aids. She caught every desertion. "My lord," she would murmur, mid-sentence, "without looking up the price of timber is not, in fact, located in my neckline." And then she would take her time straightening, recross her legs the other way, and continue slower. I want the record to show that I fought valiantly, that I lost 11 engagements out of 11, and that she enjoyed the war more than any conquest I have ever written. Somewhere near dawn she delivered her findings, satisfied as a scientist confirming a theory. The body likes beauty, and the tenant has no breaks to speak of. Fascinating combination. I called it a defect. She called it a feature and mentioned she had checked the specifications personally. I did not ask when. I am learning what not to ask. The sky was going from violet to a bruised, hopeful purple when she stood, brushed nothing off her gown, and ended the night the way she ends everything, on her own terms. She took my face in both hands, kissed my forehead, soft and deliberate, like sealing a letter she had spent a long time writing, and then leaned to my ear, and I felt the smile before I heard it. "Your last present," she whispered. "Because you like looking at beauty, you are going to love this." The chime rang once, low, almost shy about it. Hero's Sanctum, upgraded, special pool. And when I turned to ask the obvious question, special how? Pool of what? Why are you smiling like that? The light was already coming apart, unhurried, the way she does everything, and her voice arrived last, from nowhere, thoroughly delighted with herself. "Build it and see, my lord. Do try to be entertaining." I stood alone in the first gray light with a shack, a shrine, a warm forehead, and the professional certainty of a man who has written this exact trope from the other side. I know a loaded chest when a goddess giggles at it. I gave the shrine a long look. The little statue looked serenely back. Somewhere, I am certain, popcorn was involved. Morning then. The first real morning of my lordship, and my domain in full, one green valley where a city used to be, one river with excellent opinions about stone, hills wearing 200 years of untouched timber, every trunk politely announcing its price to my new eyes, one shrine, and one manor. I inspected the manor. The manor contains a cot, a hearth, and an axe. The axe, as far as I can determine, is the furniture. And here is the thing I want you to understand about what the system does not do. It does not build. There is no city coming back for free. I checked carefully twice. The blueprint in my head wants roughly 80 timber and 60 stone before the sanctum stands, and every plank of it will be cut, hauled, and stacked by the only pair of hands on this side of the fog. Fine. Better than fine, honestly. I have been handed things all my lives. Handed to people, mostly. And there is a version of this story where a golden city rises overnight and means nothing. Not this one. Every bowl of rice, one bite at a time. I took the axe off the wall. It had a price tag, too. Sentimental value, said my ledger, which I choose to believe was a joke. I was on the shack step, working out where the first tree would fall, when I saw my last neighbor leave. An old shape, bent in the ragged, stiff remains of what had been a miller's smock, standing at the far edge of the valley where the morning sun was coming down clean in gold for the first time in 200 years. It did not like the light. I watched it turn from the sun the way a man turns from a cold wind. No hurry, no fear, just an old, patient discomfort, and walk into the violet wall and the fog folded around it like a door closing softly. The last of the kept, giving up the valley to the daylight. And I sat there with my axe across my knees and understood the shape of my new life in one quiet stroke. The sun holds my land now, and the sun keeps office hours. The days here belong to me. The nights are still theirs, out past the tree line, in the country of the door that closed. I made a note in the ledger I keep behind my ribs, the one no system wrote, "Get walls before winter." And a second note, smaller, the miller had a smack, which means the miller had a mill, which means this valley once fed people. It will again. That one I underlined. And then for the first time, properly, deliberately, sitting on my own step, in my own valley with the morning coming up gold, I opened the panel. It unfolded across the whole sky of my vision, patient as a ledger and twice as honest. Soren Corvell, Lord, Potential S Black Iron, rank 1, the smallest number in my own kingdom, and constitutionally so, because everything I summon will arrive at gold and look down on management, which is exactly how I would have designed it. Skills, a blade of light I have held for one heartbeat, a summoner's gift I have not dared touch, on a ledger that prices the world. Blueprints, one sanctum, iron rank 1, special pool, contents giggled at by a goddess. One manor, generously described. Holdings, one tile of one map, lit like a lamp in a dark house. Treasury, 1 gold, 90 silver and change. And beneath the sanctum's plans, in small patient runes, the price of the door I will build it into, an offering of 1 gold piece and 10 drops of blood. I sat with all of it for a long time, the way you sit with the first page. 13 lives. 13 sets of books kept for other people, masters, houses, employers, gods. I closed the panel, picked up the axe, and walked toward the tree line. And if you had passed me on that hillside, you would have heard the Lord of the Valley informing his empty, sunlit, entirely repossessed domain in a completely level voice for the first time in 13 lives. The books are mine. Episode 5, my lady. Bring snacks.